Hello and welcome to the Swine Disease Reporting System. This is the report 30 of August 4, 2020. My name is Daniel Linhares.
Hello, my name is Giovanni Trevisan.
And today we have two special guests with us. Roger.
Yep. Roger Main, glad to be here.
Hey, Jerry.
Hi, Jerry Torreson. Pleasure.
So, today with those two special guests, of course, the directors for the Iowa State University VDL and University of Minnesota VDL, respectively. Just a little bit before we get to the report, just a little bit about the organization of this recording. We're gonna go through each page of the Swine Disease Reporting System Report 30 and try to share the most important findings for this month, and then we're gonna have questions for the guests at the end of each page. So with that, we appreciate again the opportunity to have both Roger and Jerry with us, and start asking each of them, and start with Roger, then moving on with Jerry. The Swine Disease Reporting System, of course, is a collaborative program where we have data being shared on a daily basis from those VDLs, and also from Kansas State and South Dakota State University. And the question is, why do you guys participate? What's the importance of this mutual collaboration between VDLs to share, aggregate, and present to the swine industry data on pathogen detection over time?
Sure. I'll go ahead and just start, Daniel. And again, appreciate the opportunity to participate today. And, you know, from here, this effort has been a project, I think, you know, Jerry and others that we started working on probably 3 or 4 years ago now, initially, with some of the very kind of formative work that really set out to enhance the standardization of our diagnostic data between laboratories. So essentially, there was a significant project that was a cooperatively funded project between SHIC and the USDA that was built around establishing really a full library of what they call these LOINC codes and so on, basically such that when we went to transmit information between laboratories, that it essentially looked the same. And that's really a foundational element for enhancing connectivity of diagnostic information, both regionally and nationally. And that was an effort between the University of Minnesota, South Dakota State University, Kansas State University, and our crowd here at Iowa State. And it's been, from my perspective, it's really been a tremendous collaboration that started really at the ground level, and that then this SDRS effort evolved from the capabilities that were created through that initial work. And from my view is it provides a way that, you know, you can aggregate data from kind of this core set of, you know, Midwestern veterinary diagnostic laboratories that provide services to the larger percentage of the U.S. pork industry, as a means of identifying and monitoring what I would call trends at a very macro level of what's happening with the health of swine, and particularly around the pathogens that we've chose to start with in monitoring. So from my perspective, it's been a good, significant first step forward, and really appreciate all the collaboration amongst the labs, and Daniel and Giovanni and Edison, to your leadership for really helping put this SDRS thing together and move forward.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Roger said. It once you get everything standardized and translatable in the same language, you're all dressed up, and now you have some place to go with it. And so we wanted to have it be a natural progression. And so Roger did a great job leading the team, including Clemson, Michael, right, that helped with a lot of the technical aspects. And I want to emphasize that it was no small feat to get all the coding standardized, and that Iowa State also built a resource for the whole country then to come in and build upon for other species or for other diagnostic tests. And so really the heavy lifting was getting everything all done, and it really was a lot of work. I mean, we can't minimize how much effort went into all of that among all the different labs, and especially at Iowa State being the cornerstone of getting that all set up. And so now we have this very robust system that's standardized and able to do this sort of work where we can provide the information in an aggregated way and be able to look at it in many different ways, but especially in this aggregated report that pulls together the results from various labs in a way that is automated, and so nobody has to fuss with a lot of, well, okay, there are a few things you have to fuss with behind the scenes always, but it's a routine, robust, regular thing that is all set and proceeds on a regular basis. And it's so why collaborate on this, I think, was the original question. Because there is power in bringing information together so that everybody sees the same thing at the same time. And so you could argue it's a great equalizer, because rather than anybody having control over mass quantities of information, it's available all over for everyone. And so people can interpret the information how they see fit. And I know everybody looks at the charts a little differently. I have a few key things I hone in on and want to make sure I check in and see. And so people can take it however they want to and get the power of all the information in one spot, using it how they see fit. And so to me, that's the value of our participation in that our clients and others can benefit from all the data that winds up in one pot.
Yeah, and thanks again for the leadership from you both, and I'm sure we can say the same for Jane and Jamie from South Dakota and Kansas, respectively. It's certainly an asset, I think, for the industry to have the opportunity to look at that data in an aggregate fashion, right? And thanks to you guys for agreeing to share and join that collaborative project. So, right. So moving on here to the PERS page, which is the first, actually the second page of the report after the introduction. Giovanni, what are the highlights for the PERS page this month?
During July, there was a moderate decrease in the PERS virus detection from 25.5% to 21% of the positive case, and this happening in all age categories. Besides the decrease that was observed for the overall detection, there was some signals for observed detection of PERS virus above 3 standard deviation for state-specific baselines for Minnesota, Missouri, and Indiana. And the advisory group pointed out that the detection of PERS virus during this time of the year, it's likely to be associated with monitoring and constant testing of herds that are seeking virus elimination. And so these late winter spring breaks continue to be testing positive, and these pigs continue to go for the nursery finishing sites. But at the same time, the advisory group pointed that at this time of the year, we are expecting to see a more intense decrease in PERS virus detection than the observed during colder months.
All right, and so going back to our guests here, in your opinion, what are the benefits of monitoring an endemic disease such as PERS virus? Everybody know that's around. Why monitor? Why get that data across the VDLs and share? We'll start with Jerry on that one.
Yeah, why indeed? You have to look at the big dog, and so this obviously was the first one that was monitored, and is obviously the one that gets a lot of attention because it is such a big deal for industry. It has major impacts on pig numbers, and so how I look at this, I tend to look first at the your trend analysis, and so I look at the blue wave and see if we're tracking above or below sort of the predicted level, and that's a really important indicator of how we're doing. I do want to throw out my eternal disclaimer for using veterinary diagnostic lab data. However, this is somewhat a denominator-free number, and so it's an imperfect estimate of what exactly is going on. So having said that, it's still a very useful tool because we do see these trends emerging over time, and we have the benefit of seeing the historical data, and we can look back and say, yep, I remember that was a real thing. And so that gives us more confidence that as we're proceeding forward and looking at the new numbers, that it probably means something. And so I look at the trend line, see where it is compared to the fit line, and again, see that it matches with the expectations. So I have to, I'm at Minnesota, I have to put a little plug. We also have another tool, the Morrison Swine Health Monitoring Program, and so that's sort of the complementary piece. It's a voluntary user-furnished data set, and so it doesn't come from the diagnostic labs. It's self-reporting from the producers, and so we balance one against the other to say, do these stories jive? Are they in sync? And I think for those of you who are participants or get the report there, you see a similar thing happening. And so that's the other thing I do is I look at this trend line and I compare it against what's happening in the MSHMP report. The other thing I look at in particular is just the testing numbers. Are people continuing to test? You know, we had an awful lot of PED testing. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead to a different report, but
that's fine.
When there was substantial federal support for testing, there was an awful lot of testing, and some of that declined, obviously, as external support diminished. And so you find out what the real interest is, where people are willing to pay their own money to do this surveillance or to do diagnostic testing. And as was mentioned by the advisory group, a lot of the testing is routine surveillance. One concern I have, and I've expressed this, I guess, before, when we're looking at a lot of this testing, especially for PRRS, there's some dilution of the effect of clinical cases because we do so much surveillance testing. And so it becomes a less sensitive indication of what's going on clinically. And we just all have to factor that in when we're looking at these charts, because a great proportion of the testing is people monitoring routinely. And, you know, the fine adjust knob might not be there initially because of this sort of big buffer of all the routine surveillance. So I guess that's a general overview of how I look at these charts generally, and some specifics for this month.
Thank you. Roger?
Yeah, I would jump on that. I think, to me, one of the really interesting pieces that's come out of this has been Jerry mentioned it, but is this using these seasonality prediction charts, and maybe Daniel, you or Giovanni could explain that further about the methodology that you've done to pull that together. But I think that is very informative, as Jerry mentioned, to see where we are as compared to year over year, or as maybe predicted by past years' performance. And also, he mentioned too that linkage between the Morrison Swine Health Report data, which is really that status, self-reported status level information as it relates to sow farms, and how that relates back to this, which is just pure testing based detection. And I think by and large, if you look at them, they've really fit pretty well. And Daniel, you may go into some of the work that I know you've worked closely with Caesar, some back and forth about maybe how one predicts the other. And so I think it's been a great effort to pull this together, and I think very complimentary of the Morrison report. And to me, a key part of this is, at a very macro level, at an industry-wide level is, and some of this is like, are we making progress in our control of some of these diseases or not? I think that's been, to me, the combination of both of this report and the Morrison report have done a tremendous job at that, because it gets it out beyond the framework of what any individual producer may be seeing in their particular operation, area, or region, and say, how does what they're seeing and experiencing compared to what's happening overall? And so I think these reports, meaning the SDRS and the Morrison report collectively, I think have really, from my perspective, probably been, the first time outside of, back in when we had a national or and state level elimination effort underway, mm-hmm. The first time where we have some reasonable sense that we're pulling all this data together, and it's not perfect, but I think it gives you a general sense of what's happening across the country, and so that I think that's been a really great thing.
I think you both talked about the value of having understanding the pattern of disease or pathogen detection. In this case, it's just a PRRS detection, and once we understand the pattern and how the pattern behaves over time, right, with the seasonality and everything, and by age groups and by specimens, once you understand that pattern, that allows to scan with the algorithms. Roger was referring to that, and to ask the question: is there anything significant happening in terms of increased or decreased detection that you should be expecting for this time of the year, for this state, for this age group, so on and so forth? Right? It's not, like you guys said, gonna dive into what are the reasons of that increased or decreased detection, but at least gonna help people understand that they should have be talking about that, right, and understand what's going on behind the scenes, right? All right, so moving on here to the page 3 of the report, Giovanni, is about detection of RNA of enteric coronaviruses by PCR. PD, Delta, and TGE. What are the highlights of this page in this month, Giovanni?
Well, for July, the detection of all of the three agents was very low. There was a decreased detection observed for PD, Delta coronavirus. TGE was not detected. And we did challenge our advisory group to point out what were their thoughts on potential measures that could be applied to minimize the increased detection of these agents at the colder months that are occurring in the second half of the year. And the advisory group listed out actions that include like the continued application of hygienic practices in the farms, clear disinfecting, the clear definition of the clean and dirty lines for the trucks, staggered loading in the winter market barns, wash, disinfect trailers from the marketing peaks. When moving animals to the packing plants, the trucks, the drivers from the truck should stay in the cab, and whenever possible, avoid intentional exposure of the replacement goods with the live virus, and of course, comply with biosecurity practices in sow farms and improve it in winter finish barns, and usage of scientific validated feed mitigants.
All right, and so we always like to hear what our advisory group thought about those findings for the report, reminding that the advisory group is a group of veterinarians and producers spread out across the U.S. from east to west to south, and so kind of get their perspective of what are their field, what are they hear, what do they hear, what do they see about those diseases. So question to our guests: How could the SDRS data, what we're seeing or discussing here now, could have helped the swine industry in the PD outbreak back in 2013? Right. Different way to ask that is, how can this system help with the upcoming or emerging diseases in the future? Jerry, start with you on that.
Yeah, that's a good question, and obviously, it it's hard to build a fire truck when the fire is raging, and so I think the key point is that you've got this infrastructure that's established. I don't want to minimize the amount of work that goes into developing a new test if there's a new disease, but really that's the least of it when it comes to all the infrastructure required to have a common reporting mechanism. And so in the PED example, people had tests up and running very quickly, and there wasn't a place to centralize the information for everybody to really get a good picture of what was going on initially. And so this is a good investment in preparedness and is a valuable tool for just being ready. Roger, you can talk more about whether or not it's a model for USDA and the laboratory network through NALM for how future reporting might look, but just suffice it to say that having everything standardized and having the ability to add new standardized codes is a big deal. I do want to just deviate a little bit back to this month's report and the value of the advisory group just for a second. So I really liked the fact that they said, we see this cyclical seasonal thing. So what? What do we do about it? And it reminds me a little bit of when I was in practice, we had somebody come in with a major pharmaceutical company who had just left the auto industry. And we were going through kind of a chalk talk thing. And we pointed out that there's, I don't remember exactly what the number was back then, maybe a 20% swing in the number of pigs that are available in the fall versus the spring. And just the summer months and the price differences. And he said, wait a minute, stop right there. You mean there's a 20% swing in the number of pigs that are marketed depending on the season of the year? And we were just like, yeah, of course, everybody knows that. And he said, how does your industry manage that? And well, we just know it happens every year. And he said, well, isn't there anything you can do about it? Well, this month, the advisory group said, well, isn't there something we can do about it? Because we see this seasonality and it's like, kind of a bee slap. Yeah, maybe we should do things differently. Okay, I'm oversimplifying it. Everybody already knows, and we try to do all that. But this is, back to what Roger was saying before, this is our report card staring us in the face, or Daniel was saying that. It's our report card that says, yeah, why do we put up with this seasonal difference? And is it good? And is there anything we can do about it? So seeing it, most people digest information better in a visual format. And so the strength of this is that it's undeniable that things are more severe in the wintertime with these coronaviruses, and maybe there are things that we can do to influence that. So enough of my soapbox.
Yep. Yeah, I would just add, Daniel and Giovanni too, is, the predictability is, on a macro level is astounding. If you look at your graphs and what you're predicting versus actual, it's like, wow, can anything guess that well? And so it's just from my perspective, and like Jerry mentioned, it's just illustrating how our system as a whole is performing from a disease standpoint as far as what's out there. And I would have, and I don't know if you got any feedback from Daniel from the advisory board of it. I also thought it might be interesting to know as we go through this, because we've had obviously with the very significant and substantial, related disruptions that, have been experienced in the pork industry this past number of months associated with the pandemic, if that would have had any, impact on things going on in and around slaughter or whatever. But so I think it'll be interesting to see if there's anything that develops or is observed as we go, into the fall from that. But it sure looks like to me, it's as it relates to PDV, is that the system is performing how it has the last few years, very, very similarly. And then the other thing I think that's very, has come out of this and early on, right, was observed on the back end of the PDV pandemic was, this thing about TGE. And And what's happened there is it's definitely its own story in its own right, and may present as an opportunity. And back to your question about, well, how, if you had this in place, would it mattered, or what would made a difference at all in the PDV outbreak? And actually, a lot of this work spawned out of the response to PDV. And if those who were around during, and working in this space during that time, it was started in the spring of 2013. And that's kind of what started to happen is, it was kind of on the fly, ad hoc basis, is to say, well, let's start working together, putting case count summaries together, just case, I don't know if it was test at that time. I think it was just case counts, meaning how many positive cases for the PDV are you having by week, and then trying to collate those across the laboratories. And that was an effort that was started in and around that time. And I think there's just been a lot of things that came off the PDV that, in our response to that led to, this type of work. But today's world would be, because of that work, we're in a lot better position to have a seamless platform where that information could flow into, rather than kind of an ad hoc, everybody pull their spreadsheet together and then let's put them together type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Just a clarification. You said that the TGE thing that happened around PED was that the number of tests, the number of cases submitted for testing for TGE increased significantly, and they all tested negative, of course. And so that was a good sign, right? The increased number of cases being submitted for enteric disease that was testing negative. Well, guess what? It was a different enteric agent coming in, which was PED. Right, so by monitoring TGE closely at that time, that could have been some signals that something was emerging. And you were talking about the coronavirus, the COVID-19, comments from the advisory group about the coronavirus and how that may have affected tests, right, or test results over time. And so that brings a good transition to the next page, the mycoplasma page. And Giovanni, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, that's correct. When you look for the mycoplasma high ammonia detection, the number of cases tested, it's decreasing in the last few months. And the advisory group did highlight that for back to us that this decreasing number of cases tested for mycoplasma high ammonia, it's like a consequence of the latest months issues faced on the market animals. So systems that are looking for eliminate the agents or are negative continue to test, but other ones have taken off some of this testing for detect mycoplasma high ammonia.
Mm-hmm. So, Roger, Jerry, any additional comment, question on this page talking about mycoplasma detection over time, or?
No, I think the one thing, and it kind of goes back to one thing that was discussed before or earlier, was that about the dilution. Like, so this data that we're looking at here is PCR data on all cases, submissions, on all types of submissions, both surveillance-based as well as, sick animal type cases. And I think Jerry mentioned it before, that because in swine medicine, there's a lot of proactive surveillance that's occurring for demonstration of freedom, system level monitoring that's going on. So from a pure test number standpoint, those really dwarf, the numbers as it relates to what I would consider purely sick animal type case submissions. And so, and maybe Giovanni or Daniel, you want to talk about that, but I think there has been some effort as well that's made an effort to say, well, this tool is for looking at macro level trends in pathogen level detection over time. And then, but that's a different question than saying, well, what about the sick animals? What about our sick animal cases? Maybe we look at those more in isolation. And I think sometimes that provides a better feel for, least for the submissions that are the animals that are being sent to the laboratory, why are these animals sick? And so I think that's been a good complementation or complement effort as it relates to this pathogen level detection data from SDRS.
Right.
And it's so we have the advantage at the lab, we can dig into it a little bit, and I haven't really looked very hard at what's been going on with the mycoplasma PCR testing, but I do remember a couple of years ago when we had a pretty significant drop-off in mycoplasma serology, and I thought, wow, what's going on? Do people not care about mycoplasma? Obviously they did, and it has to do with transitioning to other testing modalities, and so the processing fluid and lesser, oral fluid testing as well, changed how people were testing. And so people have become more efficient as well and can do more with less testing as we become more sophisticated in understanding what the best sampling frames and testing protocols are. And so I'm not discounting that it could be the market forces that are dropping our PCR testing. And some of it can be that people have figured out they can learn a lot from 10 instead of 30. And we don't want to underestimate that impact as well.
Yeah, and in the regarding this question of when we talk about this pathogen detection by PCR and what's monitoring, what's actually case coming from diseased pigs, of course, just looking at the PCR result and the submission form data, it's not possible to talk about if that PCR was from a monitoring or disease case. But there are some assumptions that we can make, and in the dashboards that are available online through the report, there is an option to look at the data only from those cases where there is tissue, right, versus oral fluid only, or some of those sample types that are usually used for monitoring. But so again, is it gonna say, is it disease, is it not? Well, not necessarily, but there are some assumptions that you can look at. Go back to what's expected for this type of the year, this sample type, this age group, and make some educated questions to further investigate as needed. To really talk about disease, that's why it's another good transition here. The last page of the report is a pilot program that we're working with data from Iowa State VDL and their diagnosticians, where they use diagnostic codes, and that's the page that we call the disease diagnosis reports. So that's beyond just PCR detection. That's what the diagnostician come up with the conclusion based on the tissues, based on all the other tests that were done, and so the diagnostician will conclude that was a PRRS case, that was a mycoplasma case, that was whatever else. And so, Giovanni, what are the take homes for this disease diagnosis page this month?
Well, during June and July, the number of diagnoses for respiratory, digestive, and neurological diagnosis was within the expected. We had increase in number of diagnoses for coccidiosis under the digestive system, but that is not a lot of cases, so that has a signal that comes out, and we will continue to monitor closely this agent. And between June 21st and 27 was an increase in number of musculoskeletal diagnoses, and the most frequent agents diagnosed are Streptococcus suis and Mycoplasma hyoscinovi. During July 2012 to 18, there was increased number of diagnoses for the urogenital system, and here we have the reproductive diagnosis together. Mm-hmm. And the most frequent agent under this system was PRRS virus. So quite a few small signals, and not that was very expressive.
All right, and so that brings us to the next question to our guests, starting with you there, Roger. So this section, again, this is about disease diagnosis, right, which is beyond pathogen detection. So reporting this is a step forward than compared to detecting PCR results only. Anyways, going forward, how do you envision further strengthening this communication between the practitioner and the diagnostician so that we can improve the ability to communicate what VDLs or the VDL team is finding to help producers further understand disease activity in the field?
Yeah, I think the efforts that have been around, say, trying to pull out what we just broadly call sick animal cases, right, wrong, or indifferent, and we probably the only way really we have a quasi clean way at the laboratory to do that. It's kind of like reason for test, and the best way we can do that in a broad cut today is where there are tissues submitted, meaning that somebody performed a necropsy on an animal in the field or submitted live animals for necropsy because there was a clinical illness being evaluated. And so that's how we kind of get this into this bucket. And then our diagnosticians have really, I think, worked together really, really well to say, how do we better and more consistently put a set of categorical data associated with every tissue-based case. And that is the outcome of those categorical data is what's, being shown here in your disease diagnosis. And so I think that creates a decent picture. It's not obviously any diagnostic data is biased and there's limitations. I think Jerry mentioned that before for sure, but I think it definitely points you in a direction to say which of the pathogens out there for these different types of diseases or syndromes are causing the most clinical problems, and if you look on the respiratory side, it's like, yep, PRRS and there's a lot of PRRS and influenza out there, and those unquestionably are playing a significant role in everything else associated with respiratory diseases of swine. So I think it's been a tremendous step, and we'll look forward to continue to improve as those codes are more broadly used, that we get the information, make it more broadly available and summarized for what's going on as a whole and what people are seeing in their own operation. I just see that as being a natural evolution of trying to create more value in knowledge, fact-based information about what's happening in my herd.
Mm-hmm.
And more broadly across, the greater U.S. pork industry type thing.
Yeah, I congratulate Iowa State for having the discipline to do that. There was a time when we had that well established, and part of the challenge is standardization, and standardization within labs is no small feat. I remember when this is a number of years ago, every kind of young pig diagnosis from one diagnostician happened to be coccidiosis, whether that was the case in every case or not, but it was it was the hook where the hat wound up. And so not to make light of it, it is a real challenge. So the standardization within labs is the first step. Standardization among labs is another hard task. And I guess one of the basic questions is, how many decimal places do you have to be right out to where it's, okay, is PRRS involved? Is that the primary or not? And so those are things going forward that we'll have to wrestle with and not let the precision get in the way of the accuracy, if that is a way to formulate the phrase. And so it is helpful. It's a big deal, and it's pretty hard. And so I think there are opportunities for that, and Iowa State's made a good step forward in getting that, hopefully as standardized as it needs to be, and see where it goes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, it's kind of like, you don't let, this stuff it's not perfect, but don't let perfect stand in the way of progress type of thing. I think in a big, you don't want to get down to like, well, is every individual case, is it categorized just the same amongst people? Because I don't think that's possible. But the idea is you're close. And I think in an aggregate form, it's like people doing their best they can. It definitely, I think, provides a good macro level view of what's happening, and what's causing, in this case, what's causing pigs to get sick in our industry and within each individual system's operations. But I think kind of that point about don't let perfect get in the way of the progress is a big thing.
And like the other ones, one of the benefits is over time, as it is established what are the patterns for each syndrome, right? Respiratory, enteric, and so on. It's you know how many cases you expect being associated with each of those pathogens, and if there is one that's on the rise, you could start asking questions. Hey, what's going on? And then you ask the question: is it a specific diagnostician? Is it a specific production system that's doing some looking with closer eyes to a specific pathogen because of a control elimination program, right? So again, it at least let us help people understand what are the questions they should be looking deeper, right? And so happy to be helping people with that. So with that, those were the questions we had here. The final questions for you guys is any closing thoughts, comments. I did want to go back to Jerry when he talked about the MSHIMP, the Morrison Swine Health Monitoring Program. We also see the great benefit of those two programs being close and complementary to each other. Right. In fact, Cesar Corzo, the PI for the MSHIMP, he serves as one of the advisory members for this project here. So we're always exchanging data with him and say, hey, we're seeing this activity, spiked activity in PRRS or PD. Are you guys seeing the same? So we keep a close kind of keep in touch to kind of so that both programs can keep helping the industry understanding the disease activity over time. So with that, what are your closing thoughts on this program?
I guess I'll start. I'll let Roger wrap it up. The real strength of it is that, so both for MSHIMP and for SDRS, is the collaboration that allows people to, again, get all the information out in front of them. So everybody sees the same information at the same time, and can make whatever decisions they need to make fully informed with, again, knowing the limitations and all the caveats. But we've got a lot of really smart people that fortunately have the spirit and the ability to work together and allow us to share information, and they are the beneficiaries. So I give my hats off to SHIC for the support they've given, and USDA along the way as well, and a lot of work to get to this point where it really is useful information, as long as people appreciate the limitations and make good informed decisions. And so that would be kind of my wrap up, that people working together can do pretty cool stuff.
And I would just say, my perspective, I just think it's been a great thing of the different entities coming together to try to, bring information from a lot of different sources together in a common place that hopefully it provides a platform to do some common good. And I think that from my perspective, I think we're, a lot of this work, I think there was PDV helped spawn a lot of interest in this area. And from my perspective, I think we're very early on. I think we're breaking boulders, but I think we're laying a solid foundation. And I'm sure that as if we're sitting here 5 years from today, and we'll look back to where we are right now, we're going to say, wow, that was fairly rudimentary, but it was a great start. And so I feel like it's been the right people, the right time, building on a lot of the great work. And I go back to, I really can't say enough about Bob's efforts to put that MSHIP thing together, because there's a lot of that. It's all in the same spirit of what we're trying to get done here. And I just think it has a lot of opportunity as we go forward. We reserve the right to become smarter and hopefully a little more proficient, at what we're doing, really across the board. And I think the data is unquestionably a key part of that, to be able to, quantitatively assess and measure and predict, and hopefully be able to measure progress. And maybe someday with not as worried about seasonal trends, but progress. So anyway, with that, that's all I had, Daniel. Appreciate the opportunity to participate.
No, thank you very much. That's all about we had for today. We really appreciate you both taking the time for this discussion today, and of course, all the support and guidance on the swine disease reporting system program. With that, thank you again, and have a good time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Daniel.
Well, time's been moving slow.